There are many dimensions, many more than we can see. This is proven. There may be subtle ways we interact with these dimensions. There could be beings on the other side of our dimension, our loved ones and our protectors. There's more dimensions than the ones we can see. So keep an open mind about everything. There is so much more dark energy and dark matter than there is the visible stuff. So to be certain of anything, and we are only certain of the things we are quite sure about, is to be totally and utterly wrong. Don't take anything too seriously. Don't fear anything. And don't hold on too tightly to your ideas or positions. It's all going to be wrong anyway. Welcome to Path to Peace with Todd Perlmutter. I'm your host, Todd Perlmutter. Our world is a projection of our collective consciousness. The more peace we bring into our lives, the more peace we bring into this world. So let the transformation begin. When we engage with others in the world, when we engage with ourselves, and when we engage with the universe around us, we tend to jump to conclusions. We have strong opinions. We believe the labels, opinions, and judgments so strongly, even though they are fallible. They are limited perspectives, and they are surely nothing more than a temporary thought that appears in our head. It is a reality reduced to a word, and it separates us from the oneness, and it disconnects us from each other and the universe around us. Whatever we are focusing on, we are blocking out the 99.99% of everything else we could be focusing on. And we are magnifying one tiny, insignificant aspect of reality. True wisdom comes from presence beyond thought, from that pure space of awareness where we are truly observing without all of that labeling that only distorts reality. And oftentimes it comes because we don't really trust our brain. If we don't label something, we feel we won't understand it, even though the labeling reduces something very complex, something that exists on many levels and has many layers of meaning, something that has a past and a future. And we reduce it to such tiny sounds and symbols, those letters, those words. We create these imaginary representations of other people that live in our head, and we have one about ourselves. This immediately takes us out of oneness and into me versus other. And even when we talk about ourselves, we are creating ourselves as another, because we are taking our true point of consciousness and looking at a false version of ourselves, our body, our mind, our experience, all of these things that come from conscious awareness. And instead of just being, we create a relationship with ourselves, and an image appears within our mind, and the ego speaks of ourselves as this other entity that we may love or hate at any given moment, and that will constantly change based on these thoughts that pop into our head and the words that other people speak to us. So when we become separate from others, it stems from being separate from ourselves. This is where fear and greed and jealousy and comparison and compulsive competition all emerge. This is why we can easily put way too much pressure on ourselves, while simultaneously being very hard on others. This is why we can become very quick to blame others, because it makes our egos feel better. And so when we're hard on ourselves, relief can be labeling others as less than us, because we feel the need to put someone down to lift ourselves up. And what happens is we become blind to our own faults, and yet we can spotlight those same faults in everyone else. Because when we live in this duality, when we live in this place of always taking a position, then we always oscillate between good and bad, and everyone else does too. When someone upsets us, we become blind to the goodness that is within them. And when we make a mistake, we become blind to our own virtues. And ourselves, others, and the world become like a two-dimensional animation, a cartoon, an exaggerated version of itself, where everything is in stark black and white. There's no details, there's no nuance, there's no deeper understanding of who we all truly are and how this bigger world works. There's a very funny trait about narcissists that we all have to some extent, which is they have this combination of a big ego and also a very fragile ego. They both think very highly of themselves, and they, underneath, have a very low feeling of themselves that is masked by this effort to boast themselves up and to need constant praise from others. But we all have some degree of this. We all crave praise. We all crave confidence. And yet we, to some extent, are longing for it and not feeling confident. And so we have a tendency to talk bad or think bad of others. And we feel that it is giving us a boost of confidence by putting someone else down. But in reality, we are the ones feeling and taking on that negativity, that stress of anger. And it is like we are hating our own selves because that emotion of hate is within us. It doesn't matter what direction it points. If it points at ourselves, it may appear as depression. And if it points at others, it may be anger and rage. And in both cases, that is an enormous level of stress on the body that does not bring us lasting peace, happiness, or joy, but may only bring a brief moment of pleasure at the expense of our mental peace. When we are truly relaxed and loving, We are not critical of ourselves or others. We are helpful. We are patient. We are kind and understanding. And it stems from the realization that there is no us versus them, me versus myself, and that these images we have of others are fictions that our ego creates as a defense mechanism from a fear about something that does not exist. Most of us are not at war in our daily lives. Most of us are not in a constant physical battle between ourselves and others, which is what our ego thinks it's trying to protect us from. And that battle is always turned inward on ourselves at some point, if that becomes our habitual mindset. And so we have to create a new habit of breaking down those images, those labels, and those representations of people, and create a habit of seeing the oneness all around us, to see through the egos and bodies of others, and to see through our own ego, to see the light of consciousness shining through each of us, to see that we are all made, everything in this universe, of the same subatomic particles and energies, and that the differences we perceive in these physical bodies, in the physical forms around us, in the different words that pop into our heads, are all just the illusion arising from this field of oneness. The atoms in my body are the same as the atoms in your body, and the same in everything in the universe. The stuff that makes up those atoms, the quarks and leptons and bosons, are the same in every atom throughout the entire universe. Created in the moments after the Big Bang, when everything in the universe was quite literally one. We all come from oneness. There is no empty space, not on Earth or anywhere in the universe. There is just this flow, this sea of energy and consciousness. And so quite literally, when we criticize or judge someone else, we are on some level criticizing and judging ourselves. And this is why the greatest act of self-love is to love others truly, deeply, and without expectation or the desire for reciprocation. Just pure, selfless love, and the self disappears, and all that is left is love. And this is what ultimately separates us from the narcissists, is that when we think highly of others and we give the benefit of the doubt and patience and forgiveness, we give it to ourselves. When we create a peaceful energy for someone else, we bask in that glow of peace We live at the center of that unshakable peace. And we can always be the eye of the hurricane, where it is calm and the sun is shining. And when we recognize the ego in ourselves, when we can really stay mindful and aware of how we label, how we judge, how we talk about ourselves, and how we talk about others, we become aware of the ego in others. And we can see, hey, that's their ego lashing out. That is not who they truly are. That is their egoic, automatic, habitual response. And just as I have changed, they can change. And just as I don't want to be criticized or yelled at, and that won't help me change, I see the best path forward to help others change with the most effectiveness, because I know what will put their walls up, what will make them lash out further, dig in their heels, and be unable to even hear what we're saying. So often we get mad at someone and we feel we need to tell them how we feel. And if we can take a step back, we'll usually see that that is our ego lashing out, that is our desire to make ourselves feel better, and that it is usually not the best course of action if we really want to help someone change, if we really want to create a more peaceful life for ourselves by helping someone else be less toxic or be less harmful or destructive to themselves and others, and to just help others be better people. It's not always to criticize. It's not always to ignore, but we can show by example. We can help guide, just like every teacher, just like every mentor, just like every loving parent. And the more we do that for others, you probably already know where I'm going with this, the more we are that loving source of wisdom and guidance for ourselves. It becomes a habit. It becomes second nature. When we focus on the good, it doesn't matter where we direct our focus, if it's at others or ourselves, we see the good. And it doesn't mean we are blind to the bad. It simply means that both are true, both are reality. And would we rather be miserable and negative, or would we rather make the most of every situation we find ourselves in, to learn, to grow, and to move forward without holding on to anger and resentments and comparisons and a hyper fixation on the faults of others, the faults of ourselves, and the faults of this world we live in. Just like how we would treat a child or a person with maybe a brain injury or a person going through a mental health crisis. We want to be as gentle, as kind, and patient with everyone on this planet, because everybody is demonstrating their level of ability and capacity and mental and spiritual growth. Nobody is acting in a way that would be harmful to themselves or others if they fully understood what they were doing. And so in this way, we are all going through a mental health crisis. We are all having some brain injury, and we are all on a path of growth. And sometimes we need someone to lend a hand and help lift us up. And sometimes we can be that hand for someone else. We don't live in a utopia. Not yet. We may be getting there. I hope and believe we are. But until we get there, we will live in a world of universal trauma, where every single one of us has bumped into someone who has taken their trauma out on us, whether it is meanness, cruelty, neglect, selfishness, or carelessness and unthoughtfulness, mindlessness. But just as this cycle of trauma has touched all of us, so too has the cycle of love and kindness. And we have all experienced kindness and love in this world. And we can all keep spreading that to ourselves and to others. And as that kindness and love keeps expanding, and we have more and more of the patience and the gentleness that we treat each other with, eventually that trauma cycle will break down, and we will have that utopia, because we will each have that inner peace, and there will inevitably no longer be the conflicts we see in this world. And it all starts with our relationship to ourself. Going from pressure and criticism to love, compassion, and emerging into oneness. You are not good. You are not bad. Other people are not good, and they are not bad. We all just are. And when we see that, and we stop jumping to conclusions, and we stop filling in the end of that sentence with an adjective, those images break down, and that separateness and duality and isolation, loneliness, and competition will disappear as well. Much love. And if you happen to find value in this podcast and wish to support us, your support makes this possible. So thank you so much for that. And you can support us at eastwesticism.org. That is eastwesticism.org. And it keeps me and the team able to keep making these podcasts. So thank you so much for your support. Every penny goes a long way. You have been listening to Path to Peace with Todd Perlmutter. Being here and putting in this important and noble work is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself and others. If you found this podcast even a little helpful, please make sure to leave a review so it can reach others who may be in need. And remember, the path to peace starts with a single step.